Hello, and welcome to the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast. The intention of this podcast is to open your mind, get curious about yourself, and connect to the power you hold within. I am your host, Karen Maloney, an inside-out coach, helping you to believe in yourself and manifest your desires. Check out the podcast, available on all platforms, and go to my website, www.karenmaloney.com, for all info. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It feels like I've been gone for an age, for me anyway, whether you have noticed or cared, but it seems like forever since I last did an episode. But I'm back, and if you listen to the last episode I published before this little break, you will know that I'm taking the podcast in a slightly different direction for a bit, and we're focusing solely on cancer. It's a topic close to my heart, to many people's hearts, and again, the intention of these conversations is not to tell you what to do or anybody what to do. It's simply sharing information, having conversations, expanding the conversations, and everything that people talk about as well or share, there's something we can all take on board, because it's not specifically for people with cancer. Yes, it is. They are the conversations. But everything is something that any single one of us can do as well, in preventative measures, in being accountable for ourselves, in whatever you choose to take from it. And my first guest joining me in this series is Heather Lee. And Heather is a licensed therapist in private practice, a certified psychedelic assisted psychotherapist, and the founder director of Medicine Woman Retreats. She has over 30 years of clinical experience focused on women's mental health and wellness. Heather is the past director of women's health education at the University of Virginia Medical Center and has training from the Harvard Mind Body Medical Institute. She has worked extensively with people at end of life in palliative and hospice care. She has guided clients on over 100 psilocybin journeys, and her own journey through cancer has been greatly eased and enlightened by the use of plant medicines. So that's what we talk about in this episode. Heather shares her journey, her diagnosis. She talks about there is no coincidence. She had literally just qualified as a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist when she got her diagnosis. So she believed it was a tool and a resource to help her on her journey. And she did take quite a big dose and got many insights into why this was presenting for her. And again, psychedelics may not be for every person. That's absolutely fine. But her story of how it helped her and tapping into these altered states of consciousness and getting the messages of why this was showing up for her and what needed to be healed within her and her family line was really powerful for her. But she also talks about how psychedelics and psilocybin can be used to ease anxiety around the idea of death or the end of life. But she also shares many other techniques that helped her during her journey and continue to help her, that any single person can do, that they can access. They're free. It is within their own mindset and nature, and that's where we can empower ourselves as well. And really, Heather, in her work, her intention is to empower people no matter what they are going through, cancer or anything else. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, and if you want to find out more on Heather's work, you can go to her website, www.medicinewomanretreats.com. But as always, I will have links from the show notes on my website, karenmaloney.com, and click the podcast section. Enjoy. Welcome, Heather. It's a pleasure to have you join today. And how are you doing, first of all?
I am very well, thank you. And I'm very excited to be here and share a bit of my experience with you all. But I am feeling very healthy, strong, and just feeling really, really good these days.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. And I'm excited to get more into your work and your story. And again, thank you so much for joining this series on cancer. Like that, it's a topic close to my heart, lots of people's hearts. And, the intention is just to have some more expansive conversations around the topic, to maybe even take some of the fear out of it for people. It's not saying exactly this is what you should do, because that's each person's own intuitive journey as well. But if you could just give us a little introduction to yourself and a little bit of your story before we delve deeper.
Yeah, so I am a licensed clinical social worker. I've been a mental health professional therapist for 3 decades now,
Mm,
and have had the good fortune to work in a variety of different settings and environments, and um, doing women's health education for a university at one
mm,
point, and currently I'm in private practice. And much of my work is with women, midlife women.
yeah.
And of course, cancer touches a lot of
Mm,
women's lives. So that's a big piece of what I work with. And recently I became certified. I'm one of the first certified psychedelic assisted psychotherapists in the world. So the first cohort to come through with that designation. So
yeah.
I am in a really unique position of being trained in and working with people with plant medicine, and have a really big passion for how that applies to the whole cancer journey, which is
Yeah.
why I'm here today. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And just curious, first of all, how did psychedelics and becoming a psychedelic assisted therapist, I think you said, how did that come across your path?
Yeah, well, so my whole career in the field of mental health, mind body wellness,
Mm,
women's wellness, I've always had a big interest and emphasis on stress reduction, stress management. So I've, trained in mindfulness and in meditation and used guided meditation, and always really been interested in non ordinary states of
mm,
consciousness. So I've always been drawn to dream work and what happens when we're in deep meditative states, and how do we explain paranormal, experiences, and just had a lot of curiosity about the other levels of consciousness that we sometimes are able to access when we're deep in nature, when we're
mm,
deep in dream states. And so when this opportunity to train in the work with plant medicine and this new renaissance of psychedelic medicine, it just felt like such an absolute perfect fit for me. And I will tell you, though, so many things in life are not coincidence. Things line
mm,
up when you see it. And the week that I got my certification as a psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, the exact same week that I was granted that certification was the week that I received a call and was diagnosed with breast cancer.
wow.
And I thought to myself, this is not a coincidence. This is an indication of one of the places I am to be using this medicine and working with this medicine.
That's amazing. And yes, I also don't believe there's any such thing
Yeah.
as coincidence. So what a beautiful gift to have available to you during an extremely difficult time as well. And first of all, actually, what's your understanding of cancer and what's happening in the body?
Well, I think it's got many dimensions. I think there is, I think there's a place for all of the incredible science and what's going on with modern medicine to help support in managing these physical diseases. But I think with any form of dis-ease, it is also there's psychological, social, emotional, energetic, psychospiritual. There are a lot of components to how things manifest in our physical bodies. So that's my personal framework, that I often think when anything goes on in my body, I ask myself about all of the multiple things that impact my health and wellness. And as we know, emotional states impact our immune system. I mean, one of my favorite big words is psychoneuroimmunology. Psychoneuroimmunology is the study of how emotional states impact our immune system. So I think we are still just in the infancy stage of understanding some of the ways that, thoughts precede matter, and the way that there are lots of things that impact our physical health that are not just physical.
Yeah, I agree. And, from my own bits of research and learning in all aspects, initially it was cancer related after losing my dad, but then just expanding again, just to the power of our minds and the power we have as well, and the influence over our body and many different aspects that we sometimes don't take into account. So I love that you mentioned that, and the emotional states as well. And maybe first of all, if you just share a little bit about your journey when you got that breast cancer diagnosis as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I know everybody's tale is fraught with so many. There's
Mm,
never a good time to get
no.
cancer, right?
Yeah.
But my husband and I had just decided to rent our house out for a year and to travel. And
Wow.
I thought, well, I should probably just, go and get my contact lenses. Maybe I'll go get my mammogram. I'll just do all my medical things before we are traveling for a year. So I got my annual mammogram and then got the phone call that something didn't look right and can you come back for a biopsy, and then
Mm,
then you're in the system, right? Then you're in the whole, okay, now the biopsy, now we need to send you for this and that and the other thing, and then the next thing I've had a whirlwind of exams, and then I got a phone call from the cancer navigator, who should probably go through another training because I thought she didn't handle it very well. She just called me
mm,
and said, Heather, I'm calling to tell you you have cancer. And I
mm,
thought, what I actually had, because I then did the research, was DCIS, very early stage, very small amount, stage 0. And I think it could have been framed to me a little bit differently. Now, that's not to
mm.
say I didn't have cancer, but
Mhm,
I
yeah.
had very early stage cancer. And had I not had the mindset that I have as rather resilient, that could have sent me into an incredible tailspin. But anyway,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so so there it was. I've got my house rented out. I get this diagnosis, and you're then part of the machine that is the cancer industry, right? So you're then just in the system, jumping from one thing to the next thing and setting up an appointment for the surgery date. But I back up a little bit. So I get this diagnosis, and I am now working with plant medicine and working with it. And I decide that I am going to take a rather large dose of psilocybin myself to find out, go on a deep journey inward to my own inner landscape and find out what's going on other levels of myself that may be impacting why or how this dis-ease is manifesting in my body at this time. And I'll tell you, I had
Mm.
such an incredible experience. Now, it's pretty brave to take a lot of
Mhm.
psilocybin with a brand new cancer diagnosis, because
Yeah.
if you want to talk about, dancing with the devil and facing your fears and facing mortality,
Yeah.
there were some parts of that journey that were pretty dark and scary. But I also got some really incredible information, and that's the only way I can describe it. When you do psilocybin, it's much like being almost in a lucid dream state. You're in a
Mm,
very different, altered state, another level of consciousness, but you're getting, information is coming to you as sort of this embodied knowledge. It's like the wisdom is just there. This information is there in a sense that you feel like it's known information. It's not a thought, it's like something you know.
mm,
One of the things that came to me was that this cancer for me was fear turned cellular, and that the fear was not just mine, but it was intergenerational from a line of my mother, my grandmother. It was fear-based patterns of thinking down my female lineage
wow.
based around money and partnership and men
Mm,
and partnership and feeling safe and feeling trusting and feeling financially safe. And certainly
wow.
that fit for the history of my grandmother, of my mother, and of myself. And
Mhm.
I was in a new marriage. I'd been through a bad divorce where I was financially abused in the relationship. So that really rang true to me. And
Yeah.
the message was, as part of your healing, as part of it, you need to really look at and release these patterns of fear-based thinking in these areas, and you need to live joyfully. You need to
Yeah.
live really joyfully. And my mother died of breast cancer. She was diagnosed at my exact same age
Wow.
and had just a lumpectomy and, didn't, and some radiation. And it came back 15 years later and took her life. So when I was diagnosed at the exact same age as her, knowing that my mother had passed from it, I said, well, I'm done with these boobs. You can just, so I had a full double mastectomy and just decided to opt for feeling like I would cut that chance down to, 2 to 3% of ever being an issue for me. And the joyfully piece rang so true because my mother's name was Joy. And
Wow.
literally on the journey, I kept hearing, you need to live joyfully.
Wow.
So in so many ways, I feel like I was given this gift of walking this path differently and changing the story and doing it differently to change this intergenerational pattern. And I'll just say that, whether or not we can science can prove any of this to be
Hmm.
true. What I know for me is that this made me feel incredibly empowered.
Wow.
It told me what I could be doing to help with my healing. It gave me information about what was happening on the psycho spiritual energetic level that the modern medicine, they could cut off my boobs, rebuild my boobs, do all that. But this gave me a whole nother level of knowledge, wisdom, insight, and
Mhm.
empowerment that I could work with.
That's amazing. And I think, other people I've connected with as well, even on the podcast, because obviously I've touched on cancer because it really interests me before,
Yeah.
but never done a specific series. And you're not the first person to say that it was such a gift. But
Mm,
that doesn't just come of
yeah.
itself. It's taking that initiative as well and feeling empowered and being involved in your own healing as well. And like you say, it was brave to do a big dose of
Yeah.
psilocybin. But once you got that information as well about the fear, about the intergenerational patterns and all these things that were there and to live joyfully, what did that look like for you to try release some of that and to come
Mm.
back into more joy?
Yeah. Well, and that's where, with psychedelic medicine, plant medicine, it's not just ingesting the plant that does the
Mhm.
work. It is the integration. It's all the work one does on the flip side with that information that came up. So, being a therapist, I had some tools. I started working with doing a lot of guided meditations focused on some of these patterns of, thought, changing that through things like cognitive behavioral therapy, doing journaling, making affirmations, really finding ways to sort of change that internal dialogue and narrative. So I did a lot of work with that. And I also, this is sort of a little funny side note, but I am not a tattoo person at all. Like, I just don't even like if somebody back in high school would write a number on your hand. I couldn't wait to get home and wash it off. Not a tattoo person. But I thought from this, I thought, you know what? When all these breast surgeries are done, I think I'm going to get the word joyful tattooed on the
Mm.
side of my new breast.
Wow.
And I have two daughters in their 20s who just thought that was the funniest thing. And they said they'd help me pick a font. So truly is another way of really kind of manifesting this new mindset, really making it manifest. So
Mm.
it's been an ongoing process of really
Yeah.
working with that material and doing it through. I do a lot of moving meditation. So when I'm out trail running, I'm really like, repeating to myself that I'm living joyfully. And when I
Mhm.
find myself slipping into some of those patterns, I now have practices with both journaling and with meditation and the medicine itself. Psilocybin puts you in that neuroplastic state. So during those 6 weeks to 3 months following taking psilocybin, you're still in a very neuroplastic state where
Mm.
you can really change those patterns and create new neural pathways. So I used that time to really be making sure that that was when I was really attending to my thoughts and shifting up some of those patterns.
Wow. And I love that. I love your tattoo and what a powerful image for you as well because if a person has a double mastectomy, I'm sure, then forevermore if you look in the mirror you're just reminded of this, and it can be very debilitating maybe for a lot of people. So I think, again, that's our power to be able to choose how we reframe something, and
Abs-
being able to have that symbol and that reminder there as well. It changes the whole story and image, which obviously our
mhm.
subconscious mind pays attention to.
Yeah.
And, integration as well is so powerful because, like you say, having the information is not enough. It's actually doing something with it as well. I suppose, since you're talking about psilocybin and how it helped you so much on your journey, how accessible, or is it safe for people with cancer as well to explore, obviously in a safe and legal environment as well?
Yeah. So psilocybin is incredibly safe. It
Mm.
has no toxicity levels. You really can't overdose on it. It's not addictive. There are a few places for which it's, contraindicated, and that has more to do with people's mental health. If you have a
Mm.
history of manic episodes, it's not advisable. There's some people that, it would not be a good medicine for. Um, People that are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, those work on your serotonin receptors, which is the same receptors that psilocybin works with. So sometimes those people will not have as much of an experience of the
Mm.
psilocybin. But as far as people with cancer, there really is no contraindication that this exacerbates or could, create other medical conditions.
Mm.
Um, there really is no concern there. I think one of the places that I'm looking at, I think many people have seen all of the wonderful research coming out of Johns Hopkins on psilocybin for end of life
Mm.
anxiety and distress. So there's a lot of research going on how these medications, these medicines, I should say, these plant medicines, are really powerfully impactful for people who are having a lot of anxiety about being at end of life. And they're finding that, one or two journeys, well guided, well supported with, a therapist, really give people this sense of that it's okay. That
Mm.
ultimately, even if their physical journey of humanity may be coming towards a close, that somehow there is so much more, that we are so much more. And it gives people this great sense of peace. But I'm really interested in, and this is part of what I'm, pioneering and starting to speak with people in the cancer arena about, is that I think there's a place for doing this type of journey and using these plant medicines early in a diagnosis,
Mm.
much the way I did, to give women, particularly women with breast cancer, an understanding of how they can feel empowered. What are the, as I say, sort of psychospiritual, emotional components of the disease that they can attend to? So there's meaning making, there's empowerment, and again, these are very, very safe. Psilocybin is a very safe plant
Mm.
medicine. Anything in your medicine cabinet or your bar right now is way more dangerous for you.
Mm.
I mean, alcohol is a
Yeah.
neurotoxin, and we all promote that like it's nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it is changing the conversation. And again, a lot of it stems to fear of the unknown and how they've been labeled as a class one drug and keep away from them and things like this. And we
Yeah,
take that on as well, unless we're willing again to inform ourselves. And whether that means researching more because there's so many studies coming out now, or
yeah,
experiencing it for ourselves to actually know the truth of it. I think that's, well, I'm certainly an experimenter in ways like that as well. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm a big skeptic, but if something calls my attention, I'm willing to explore to see what's there for me. But I understand there's huge fear and everything for a person, especially around psychedelics. So, and I know you've touched on it as well, how psilocybin can help a person on their cancer journey. But is there
yeah.
any other ways as well, or more that you can share on that, on how it actually can support a person in their journey?
Yeah, my private practice, my retreats, I'm called is Medicine Woman Retreats, and so my focus has always been, as I mentioned at the beginning, working with women and women's life journeys. So I think these medicines have an incredible role to play for women at midlife.
Mm.
looking at the next part of your your lifespan and how to find passion and path and purpose. I think these medicines help us tap into our own innate inner wisdom. And so often when I do retreats with women and we sit in circle and we support one another and we create, a little mini tribe of women for a week where we're supporting each other and using these medicines, the insights and the inner wisdom that bubbles up and helps people really recognize what is my path in this next phase. I work with a lot of women who've been through divorce or have had different health challenges, loss of parents, empty nesting. All those big transitions in our lives can be well served by some of this
Mm.
journeying inward and looking for some of the insight and awareness that's there. I mean, historically, and indigenous people have used these medicines for exactly those types of big life transitions and finding our paths forward.
Yeah. And I think that's powerful, like you just said, finding that insight and awareness that's there, but it's unconscious. And
Yeah,
I think when we're again willing to explore and be curious, we kind of find that we're not helpless, that there is so much that we can do as well to support ourselves among a multitude of things, but
yeah,
we're so oblivious to what's unconscious within us. And you alluded to it before, that intergenerational aspect, which is not spoken about in the allopathic or any kind of emotional psycho-spiritual aspect. And it's not to say that that's wrong, but because it's so multifaceted, I think it does need an overall perspective and a more holistic approach and complementary,
yeah.
because there are so many different aspects to it. So maybe just to even touch a little bit more on some of the psycho-spiritual or emotional, or as you mentioned, intergenerational elements of cancer as well.
Yeah, well, I think there we might, you see patterns of cancer in families, and some of that is genetic. But given what we know about epigenetics, it does beg the question: why did these genes express in some people and not in others? And I dare not say that I can speak to that from a very deep scientific level, but I do think it makes you kind of wonder, what is there some way that we carry some of these thoughts and these conceptions that I've spoken to so many women who say, "Well, I just was always waiting. I just knew that I was going to end up with breast cancer." And you have to wonder if there's not
Mm.
a component there of setting that forth. And I don't ever want to blame someone for
Yeah.
creating their own cancer. I
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to be
yeah.
really careful of that. You
Yeah.
know, but it's just I think it's important to kind of look at the big picture and have the open mind, and in that conversation to recognize that what that does is that really just sort of empowers us to take more
Mhm.
control over, that we can be participatory in this via what we do with our minds and emotions. So once the cancer is there in your life, that doesn't mean you just give yourself over. You still There's so
Mm.
much you can do, that we can do for ourselves, that truly is impactful for your health and wellness. I speak with many women who, now are having to go and have, because they've had cancer and they're constantly going for all of this monitoring. But you have to be careful of the mindset, because you don't want to feel like, well, it's just a matter of when. It's just a
Mm.
matter of when it's going to come back. No, it's not. It's a matter of if, not when.
Mm.
And so just, I think the medical model sometimes doesn't recognize the power and the importance of mindset. And so that's another piece that I really like to work with people on, is
Mm.
how are you carrying the history of this now in your mind, in your heart, in your emotions, in your beliefs, because that's pretty important as well.
Yeah, it's hugely important as well. And I love when you said that, don't give yourself over. And I
Yeah.
think, that's often what might happen with that word, because it's such a loaded word. And I know I saw my own dad's journey as well, that when that diagnosis comes, just kind of the fear and the shock. And I remember he wanted to look at other options as well, but he just felt he had no time. He just
Yeah.
felt he had no other choice. And, knowing what I know now, the majority of the time you do have at least a week or two to think about it and explore other options as well. Because, the reality of living with the tumor is most of the time they're already there, between
Yeah.
8, 15 years. So
Yeah.
another week or two is not going to make a huge amount of difference if it's not pushing on your brain or,
Right.
obviously a major artery. And I think it a sense of defeat does often come in because it is such a loaded word and we kind of hand our power over. But
Yes.
again, I love what you said as well, this what if. And I always talk about as well, and it's absolutely not about fault. It's
Yeah.
nobody's fault. But I
No.
often talk as well with my clients. I was like, but what if there was an element of things unconscious within us that is creating our current reality? Well,
Hmm.
if we can create things unconsciously, doesn't that mean that we can create whatever we want consciously?
Yes. Yes.
But again, that's the empowerment piece because I know it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes.
Yeah.
When we like the amount of times and insights I've had within myself and limiting beliefs and subconscious patterns that were there that I was completely blissfully unaware of, the amount
Yeah.
of times that I've kind of face planted myself going, oh my God, because when you see it, it's like it was always there in front of your eyes. But
Yeah.
we didn't know because we don't know what we don't know. So I love when you shared as well other elements, CBD and journaling. But if someone didn't feel the psilocybin route was for them as well,
Mhm.
what else really benefited you on your journey?
Oh my goodness. Well, a couple of things, and then I want to make sure I remember to come back to this, note to myself on it. So nature
Mm,
immersion. I am a huge proponent of nature immersion for health and healing. So on my psilocybin journey, and again, psilocybin doesn't have to be part of it, but for me, part of the information I got also was you need to go into nature, you need to find like healing waters, and you need to just like get naked in the healing waters to prepare yourself for this upcoming surgery and this whole thing your body's going to go through. And I
mm,
thought, oh, I love that. And so when I came out of, the journey, I said to my husband, we have to go camping. We have to go in the woods. I got to go get naked in some water in the wilderness.
yeah.
And so off we went, and we didn't know where we were going to go. And I tell you what, we found this waterfall all to ourselves in the middle of nowhere in Utah. We got the last camping spot and we hiked in, and somehow there was nobody there. And I hopped in, skinny dipped, and as part of, again, feeling empowered, I felt like, okay, this is something I'm doing. I'm preparing my body in almost a ceremonial, ritual way. I am bathing my breasts in this water in the wilderness, and this is part of me preparing myself for these surgeries I'm going to have. I could have done that without the psilocybin. And I
Mhm.
look
Yeah.
forward to the opportunity to guide women and have these kinds of,
Mm,
go into the wilderness, go into the forest, go into nature, find that water, do things that feel like ritual and ceremony and taking care of yourself and doing things with meaning and purpose and magic. I mean, so much of that is missing from our culture. And I think there's a place for it in healing. I think there's a
mm,
really big place to bring that into healing. So that was one piece is the nature immersion, and then guided imagery and guided
mm,
meditations. I mean, I did a lot of guided imagery prior to my surgery where I mentally ran through the whole surgery in my mind, pictured myself on the table, pictured the surgeon saying, "Oh, this is great. We're doing a good job. We've got it
mm,
all. She's looking good. This went easily." So when I went in for that surgery, I had already done it in my mind probably 50 times. So it was like then I was just catching up with something I had already
mm,
laid the mental plan out for. So I had less anxiety around it. Research study shows that guided imagery actually creates
mm.
better surgical outcomes. So that is another something that, again, doesn't involve psilocybin. It's there. These are tools that are there for us to use.
Mm. Oh, I love that, mental imagery, that visualization, that mental rehearsal. Because even, I don't know, was it a couple of weeks or months ago now, I recorded a podcast, a solo episode on exactly that and the amount of studies that have been done in all aspects of life, but even with athletes and whether they're actually
Yes.
training, whether they're doing nothing, and whether they're mentally rehearsing only. And
Yeah.
basically, between actually physically training
Mhm.
and mentally rehearsing, they were pretty much the same results. So
Yep.
it's so powerful. And I just love that you shared that because, again, that is so much power that everyone holds right
Yeah.
there, no matter what else is going on. Mentally rehearsing what the outcome that you want to see or how you want to feel. So, so powerful. I
Yeah.
absolutely adore that. And thank you for sharing that again and bringing it front of mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was actually, it was a study in, it was the journal of, oh, I can't even remember now. It was like, some journal of like, I don't even remember, like exercise physiology or something.
Mm,
But they had people just like, they had one group that like literally moved their finger up and down, and the other group just imagined that
mm,
they moved their finger up and down. And they had almost the same amount of muscle tone development between the people that did it and the people that did nothing. So I always tell people, if you can't get to the gym, just
yeah.
picture yourself at the gym.
Yeah, absolutely. You're like, and this is my work as well. And this was what I've been delving deep into in the power of our mind, the mental
Yeah.
images or subconscious. And that's why I call myself an inside out coach, because that's the power we have to create different things. But again, it can be unconscious or conscious, but we're never certainly helpless. And I think that's important always to remember, no matter what we're facing as well. But obviously with cancer there is so much there because it is such a fear topic and
Yeah,
subject. And did you want to circle back to something?
I did. What I
Was it?
wanted to circle back to, it feels important to say that,
Yeah.
in our culture, in our language, in so many cultures, we have this absolute, fear of death, fear of our
Mm,
mortality, and fighting it at all costs. And we say things, around cancer like, "Oh, he lost his battle. She lost her battle." And there's a part of me that really wants to do a little reframe even on that, because you know what the death rate is? It's 100%. Every single
yeah.
person is going to die, right? Nobody gets out
Yeah.
of here alive. So we
Hmm.
all have an end, and we don't know what that is. We have no clue what that is. It could be getting, in a car accident tomorrow. It could be dying in your sleep on 100. We don't know. And there's a part of me, I've spent many years, I worked for hospice, and I've spent quite a bit of time with people at end of life. And it was actually some of the most beautiful, wonderful
Mm,
experiences I've had sitting with people at end of life. And I wish that we could sort of do a big reframe and embrace at times as well that sometimes it's okay to embrace if it is
mm,
time and something has come that is going to be the thing that is your ticket. You know,
mm,
it's good to fight the good fight. It's good to want to just live here and suck it all in. It's an amazing, beautiful experience to be alive and to be human and have this gift of life. But sometimes it's going to get the better of us. That's just the truth of it. And
mm,
my mother, I walked with my mother to the end of her journey, and the last 2 weeks of her life, she was really sad that the cancer was going to take her. I was sad the cancer was going to take her. But we spent those last 2 weeks, I moved into her bedroom with her, and we stayed up every night giggling like schoolgirls,
mm,
talking in the night, had the most amazing journey right to the end of her existence. And she, was like, "I'm sad I'm leaving. It would have been nice if I could have stayed longer, but I have to go. And I'm really glad that you could be here with me, and that we don't have to be afraid. We don't have to push it away because it's coming. And I'm glad that we can just walk to the end together holding hands."
mm. Beautiful, beautiful. And I went through a phase as well of being fascinated by near death experiences, and even in non-altered states of consciousness, we can reach there, whether nature meditation or plant medicines. But when we get a sense of who we are and what's on the other side, it's like,
Mm,
yes, the physical separation is so tough, but it's like, oh, I can't be sorry for them, really, in one sense, because anyone who has spoken about a near-death experience or that, just that love and that
mhm.
feeling. And most of the time when people touched it, they're like, I didn't want to come back into the human
Yeah,
body. And that's not to take away from obviously losing a person. It's extremely difficult, that physical
right.
separation. But again, it's like we're kind of clueless to who we are at the universe, what is there as well. And I know it's been my journey that the more I've explored and opened myself up, it's taken out some of that fear as well. Not to say that it's not scary, but it's
Yeah.
certainly taken out some of the fear. So yeah, what a powerful conversation as well, and I really really appreciate you coming and sharing today. And please, if there's anything else that you feel called to share, please do, and please also share where people can find out more on your work.
Yeah, well, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I mean, these are all the things I just absolutely love, love,
Mhm.
love, love to talk about, and I'm so passionate about. And I'm really excited for some paradigm shifts in, how we conceptualize health and wellness, and the use of the sort of reemergence of these plant medicines into our culture. I think they offer so much hope and healing in so many different ways. I'm really excited. I'm doing some trainings for doctors and mental health professionals. I'm doing those in Jamaica to train folks on how to use these medicines, because sooner than later, these are going to start being used. There's going to be more legalization and more use of them in medicine. So I'm doing trainings in Jamaica. I also run retreats in Jamaica and Portugal, and have some upcoming ones I'm working on for the Netherlands. And
Mhm.
people can find out more about my work and my practices at medicinewomanretreats.com. Yeah, and I also, I'm a therapist in private practice, and I work with people who have had their own medicine experiences wherever, however, but want to work on that material that's come up.
Mhm.
I'm an integration therapist helping people work with that, and hoping to be developing more and more programs specifically for women and women with early stage cancer on how to use these medicines.
I love it. And what an inspiration. And thank you so much for being in that space and going through your own journey and being in that conversation of having those paradigm shifts. So I really appreciate what you're doing. And thank you so much for joining as well. And as always, I will share the links on the show notes as well from my website.
Oh, super. Well, thank you so much. Lovely chatting with you today.
Thanks for listening. And before you go, I would love to ask you a massive favor. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode of the podcast, I would love for you to leave a short review on Apple Podcasts to help it grow. If you could do that, I would greatly appreciate it.